Texas doesn't wait. As of 2026, the warrants are signed, the dates are set, and inside Huntsville, the most active execution chamber in America, the machinery of death is restarting. While much of the country slows down, 3 men on Texas death row are counting their final days, out of appeals, out of options, and out of time. Today, we will examine who these inmates are and the brutal crime that led their path to death row. If you're new here, subscribing and liking the video is completely free, but it goes a long way in helping this channel reach more viewers who care about justice and truth. This is Verdict Vault. Cedric Allen Ricks. For Cedric Allen Ricks, the countdown to the execution chamber is no longer an abstraction. As of early 2026, his legal avenues have run dry, all appeals denied, all clemency efforts exhausted, and the final warrant signed. Texas plans to carry out his sentence by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit, nearly 13 years after the crime that changed multiple lives forever. It started on May 1, 2013, Bedford, Texas. In the quiet of a late spring evening in a modest apartment on Park Place Boulevard, an argument turned into something far darker, a brutal and unthinkable act of violence. Ricks, 38, confronted his estranged girlfriend, Roxane Deanna Sanchez, as she carried groceries into her apartment, an ordinary moment that should have ended with a closed door. Instead, it became the last moments of her life. Court records describe a heated argument that quickly spiraled out of control. As voices rose, Sanchez's young sons rushed forward, instinctively trying to shield their mother. The violence that followed was swift and relentless. Ricks pulled a knife and stabbed Sanchez again and again. Her 8-year-old son, Anthony Reyes Figueroa, was also attacked, a child caught between fear and instinct, wounded repeatedly in the same space where he had tried to protect her. A third child, 12 years old, was stabbed more than 20 times across his neck, chest, face, and hands. He survived only by pretending to be dead, later telling the jury he copied his younger brother's fading sounds so the attacker would stop. An 8-month-old infant, the child of both Ricks and Sanchez, was inside the apartment that night. The baby was unharmed, a detail prosecutors said made the violence not less horrifying, but more disturbing in its deliberate focus. When the assault ended, Ricks left the scene, driving away in Sanchez's car. Authorities would later trace his location through a cell phone signal to Garvin County, Oklahoma, where he was taken into custody without incident after a pursuit. The trial moved swiftly. A Tarrant County jury deliberated for only 45 minutes before finding Ricks guilty of capital murder, a determination so clear to jurors that the conviction phase ended almost as soon as it began. The defense sought to present contextual arguments, citing mental health, background, and claimed triggers, but the brutal nature of the crime dominated proceedings. The jury then spent roughly 7 hours during the punishment phase before unanimously recommending a death sentence in May 2014. That verdict placed Ricks on Texas's death row, beginning what would become over a decade of litigation, appeals, and legal maneuverings. As is common in capital cases, Ricks's defense team challenged the conviction and sentence through a series of appeals in both state and federal courts. Among the arguments raised were claims regarding Fourth Amendment protections, the admissibility of evidence gathered without a warrant, and alleged prejudicial impacts of certain witness testimony and autopsy photography. In each instance, the courts, including the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, declined to overturn the verdict or grant relief. Judges consistently ruled that officers' warrantless entry into the crime scene was justified under circumstances where they reasonably assumed occupants were in imminent danger, an interpretation firmly rooted in existing jurisprudence. At the federal level, Ricks filed petitions to the U.S. Supreme Court. The docket in his most recent petition reflects an attempt to extend time to seek review, a procedural move granted by Justice Alito, but the High Court has yet to intervene meaningfully in his case. With appeals exhausted, Ricks's case reached its final legal chapter in late 2025. On October 17, 2025, a Tarrant County District Judge signed the final execution order. The date? March 11, 2026. Texas officials confirmed he will be executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit, a stark reminder that the state's capital punishment system operates with procedural finality once judicial review has run its course. As March 11, 2026 approaches, Cedric Allen Ricks stands at the threshold of the sentence imposed over a decade ago. Unless a last-minute stay is granted, something courts rarely issue at this late a stage, he will be led into the execution chamber for lethal injection, closing a long chapter of litigation and finality in Texas's capital punishment system.
James Garfield Broadnax. On June 19, 2008, Garland, Texas, in the early hours just after midnight, outside Zion Gate Records, a Christian music studio on the edge of downtown, two young men were finishing their work for the night, Stephen Swan, 26, and Matthew Butler, 28. Swan worked for Butler at the studio. Butler was the owner and an aspiring Christian music producer. Moments later, both men lay dead on the pavement. Broadnax and his cousin, Demarius Dwight Cummings, had traveled to Garland earlier that day, according to their own statements, with the intention of committing a robbery. In interviews with local news stations after their arrest, Broadnax did not hide from the cameras. "I murdered them both," he told reporters, "no hesitation or nothing." The robbery itself yielded almost nothing, just $2 in cash and the use of a 1995 Ford, which they later abandoned. Broadnax and Cummings were quickly connected to the killings. Garland police spotted the stolen car shortly after the murders and tracked it to a traffic stop in Texarkana, where the two were found and taken into custody. Once in police hands, Broadnax did not retreat. In multiple televised interviews following his arrest, he openly admitted to killing Swan and Butler and said he wasn't sorry, remarks that prosecutors later played repeatedly for jurors at trial. Cummings later claimed he had only joined Broadnax for the robbery and did not intend for anyone to be killed. But it was Broadnax's actions and his words that became central to the case. In August 2009, Broadnax went on trial in Dallas County. Prosecutors laid out a straightforward narrative. Broadnax and Cummings traveled to Garland to rob someone, targeted Swan and Butler, and executed both men in the parking lot outside Zion Gate Records. The state presented physical evidence tying Broadnax and Cummings to the stolen vehicle and to a handgun later identified as the murder weapon. But the most damning evidence came from Broadnax himself. His own interviews, broadcast just days after the killings, were played to the jury. In those recordings, he admitted to the murders, described the events with unsettling lack of remorse, and even said he hoped for the death penalty. Defense attorneys attempted to frame his behavior as influenced by drugs, suggesting Broadnax was under the influence of marijuana and PCP at the time, and introduced expert testimony about mood and perceptual disturbances related to substance use. But multiple witnesses, including police officers and news crews who interacted with Broadnax at the time of his arrest, testified that he appeared lucid and coherent. After deliberations, the jury found Broadnax guilty of capital murder for the deaths of Swan and Butler. In Texas, a capital murder conviction is only the first step. The second is a punishment phase, where the jury decides between life prison and death. Prosecutors presented not only the facts of Swan and Butler's deaths, but also testimony about Broadnax's behavior in custody and other factors that they argued showed a continued threat to society. Defense attorneys countered with mitigation evidence, but the jury returned a sentence of death. Broadnax was formally condemned at age 19 in 2009. Broadnax's lawyers raised more than 50 points of alleged error on direct appeal in Texas courts, touching on everything from jury selection to evidentiary rulings. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals reviewed these claims, but ultimately affirmed the conviction and sentence. At the federal level, Broadnax filed habeas petitions and sought a writ of certiorari from the U.S. Supreme Court. That petition, according to court documents, was denied in early 2022, closing the door on further review. On April 30, 2026, Texas has scheduled Broadnax's execution by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit, the fourth in the state that year, following others such as Cedric in March. With all appeals exhausted and the final petition denied, that date stands unless a court issues an unlikely last-minute stay or a clemency petition succeeds, a rare outcome in modern Texas capital cases. Edward Lee Busby, Jr. It started on January 30, 2004, Fort Worth, Texas. On a chilly winter morning in southwest Fort Worth, 77-year-old Laura Lee Crane, a retired Texas Christian University professor and former director of a school for children with learning disabilities, parked her car in a grocery store parking lot after stopping to shop. Crane was known in her community as a dedicated educator and advocate for students who needed specialized instruction and support. Friends and colleagues remembered her as warm, committed, and devoted to her work long after her retirement. But Crane never made it out of that parking lot alive. According to investigators, Busby approached her vehicle, forced her into her own car, and drove away, abducting her in broad daylight. Prosecutors later argued the motive was robbery. Evidence presented at trial showed that Busby and an accomplice, Kathleen or Kitty Latimer, used Crane's credit cards and a blank check to make purchases totaling more than $775 in the hours after the abduction. Busby drove Crane's vehicle north out of Texas. Days later, on February 3, 2004, her body was discovered off Interstate 35 near Davis, Oklahoma. The coroner's autopsy found Crane's mouth and nose bound with duct tape, her airway compromised, and ruled the cause of death as asphyxiation. Authorities tracked the stolen vehicle to Oklahoma City, where Busby was taken into custody, driving the victim's car and in possession of evidence connecting him directly to the crime. Latimer, his companion during the crime, cooperated with law enforcement. She later accepted a plea deal and received a life sentence in prison for her role in the abduction and robbery. In November 2005, Busby stood trial in Tarrant County District Court on charges of capital murder for Crane's death. Prosecutors painted a picture of a random abduction motivated by theft, noting the calculated use of Crane's finances after her disappearance and the manner in which her body was found. The defense attempted to present mitigating evidence, including testimony related to Busby's background, cognitive functioning, and personal struggles. Among the arguments were claims that certain factors, including possible intellectual limitations, should make him ineligible for the death penalty under established U.S. Supreme Court precedent, particularly the Atkins v. Virginia ruling on executions of intellectually disabled individuals. These claims were hotly contested and became a focal point of later appeals, but at trial, the jury was not persuaded that such mitigating evidence outweighed the aggravating factors presented by the state. On November 11, 2005, the jury convicted Edward Lee Busby, Jr. of capital murder. 6 days later, he was sentenced to death. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the conviction and sentence in 2008, and in December of that year, the U.S. Supreme Court denied review, making the death sentence final. Over the next 2 decades, Busby's case moved through a complex web of appeals, motions, and legal challenges, a pattern familiar in capital cases where inmates and their lawyers seek every available procedural avenue to delay or overturn a death sentence. By late 2025, with Busby's legal challenges exhausted and no further relief granted by appellate courts, the final warrant was signed. The Tarrant County District Attorney's Office formally announced the execution date of May 14, 2026. The scheduling places Busby's case among multiple executions Texas has set in 2026, including others earlier in the year, such as Cedric and James Broadnax. For prosecutors and victim advocates, the date represents closure long delayed. For defense attorneys and death penalty opponents, it underscores continuing debates over intellectual disability claims and the fairness of capital punishment procedures in complex cases. If these stories moved you, share your thoughts below in the comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell if you want more stories that challenge our ideas about crime, punishment, and humanity. Thank you for watching Verdict Vault. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay compassionate, and keep seeking the truth.